Hey guys, Jake Carlson here, host of the Modern Leadership Podcast. Are you ready to focus on amplifying your leadership superpowers? Let's go! Good morning, friends and fellow elite achievers. Welcome back to another episode of Modern Leadership. If you are stateside, I want to wish you a terrific Thanksgiving. I hope that you're enjoying a great day with friends, family, and football. I know I am. If you're like today's guest, though, you're outside the U.S., and I still want to wish you a terrific day. I'm thankful for you. You mean a lot to me. Thanks for being a part of this podcast. Now today, I'd like to introduce another great guest, John Murphy. John is the host of the Winning Teams podcast, is an international executive leadership coach, and a best-selling author. He began as a door-to-door life assurance salesman and rose to the rank of CEO of Pan-European Life Assurance Company in Ireland. In 2004, John started his own business, John Murphy International, and has worked worldwide across a broad range of industries. His clients have included, and you'll recognize these names, Pfizer, Airbus, State Street Bank, Vodafone, Johnson & Johnson. Today, we're going to be talking about the key traits of top executive leaders. John, it's so great to have you on the podcast today. How are you?
I'm great, Jake. And listen, it's a real honor to be here. I'm delighted to join you.
Yeah, and we were talking in the pre-interview that you're located currently in the south of France, but give us a little background. Who are you as a person, John?
Well, I am married to the lovely Bernie. I've got three great daughters, Kim, Sarah, and Sammy. Kim, we're kind of an international family. Kim lives in San Francisco, and Sarah and Samantha live in Melbourne, Australia. So we're kind of pretty scattered around the place. Bernie and I moved here to the south of France to live about 7 years ago because the nature of my work is kind of location independent, as we were saying, that a lot of the coaching work that I do, that's done through, Skype or Zoom or FaceTime, whatever it might be. So, because I have clients in different parts of the world in different time zones. And the work I do with management teams, I go to their offices. So I can live wherever I like. And the south of France is a really nice place to live. So it's been great. I mean, the business has been around 14 years, and I said we've been here for 7. So it's lovely.
Yeah, and as you talk about kind of this international nature of business, and I believe, the planet is getting flatter. I mean, it's more opportunity for us to interact with people from all over the world. And so as you go about your business, you started it a number of years ago, and I want to dive in a little bit of how your business as a coach and working one-on-one with people has changed since beginning in 2004 to where we are today.
Well, I think the whole coaching world has changed in that time. And to a large extent, even going back at that time, it's 14 years ago, coaching was sometimes seen as something that remedial. Somebody's got a problem and we've tried everything else. And the last thing we'll try is we'll throw a bit of coaching at the person and see if that'll change them. And I think that over that period, people realize that in actual fact, when you look at, particularly if you look at athletes, all athletes have coaches, all high performance Olympic athletes, world, global superstars, they all have coaches. And it's not that they don't know how to do the sport, or if they do, it is that they need a coach to actually really inspire them, motivate them, and support them in their growth to stay and maintain that high performance status. And in business, that concept has grown and developed, and now it's almost unusual to find a senior executive who hasn't got a coach. And even in my own business, while I coach other people, I hire my own coach. Because I'm never going to be my own best coach. I need somebody else to hold me accountable and to stand back and challenge my thinking and my mindset. So yeah, it's hugely valuable. I think that the industry has grown a lot in that period of time.
And when I think about myself and the coaching that I do with one-on-one with other people, but also the coaching I receive myself, I liken it to driving down the highway in your car. And as long as you want to stay in your lane and keep moving forward, speed up or slow down, you can see out your front windshield, you can see out your back windshield. But as soon as you want to change lanes and go to the next level, as soon as you want to take your business or your life to the next level, you need to change lanes. And that means looking in your blind spot. And so on a car, we have these mirrors on the side that we can look into and see what's over there. In life and business, we need to look out for coaches that can be those blind spot identifiers for us that can help us see that we're not going to get in a car accident if we change lanes.
I think that's true, and it's a good metaphor. I think that really, when you think about change, change is uncomfortable. We all talk about we embrace change and we love change, but actually the truth is we all struggle with change to some degree or another. And you need to have somebody who's going to challenge your thinking and to push you. And at the end of the day, coaching is all about optimizing performance. I mean, that's really, when you boil it down, that's what you're trying to do. So it is about moving that needle up in terms of where it is to where you want it to be, and understanding what what actually plugs the gap between the performance that you're really realizing right now and the performance that you've got the potential to realize in 12 months, 18 months, 2 years, whatever it might be. So it is about really challenging that thinking and supporting somebody through that change, and supporting in a way that is independent. There isn't an agenda of the coach. There's somebody outside the organization. It's somebody who is independent and is there just purely to support you.
And when you talk about like optimizing results, one of the things that I see happening, and as you mentioned, coaching becoming more widely accepted and common, not just accepted, but actually common amongst top leaders. One of the things that we see is specialization, where different companies now are starting to get really good at one or two things and being specialists as opposed to generalists. And I think this has contributed to our desire to work one-on-one with somebody who can take a certain aspect of our business to the next level. So if we want to get better at public speaking, we go and hire a coach that can help us publicly speak. If we have struggles with strategy within our business and taking it financially, revenue-wise to the next level, we hire a strategist to come in and work with us. And so I think, culturally, it's not just in coaching, but in general, in business, we're looking for ways to kind of smart cut success and optimize results. Is that what you're seeing?
Yeah, it is. And I think it's a very good point that you're making, Jake, as well, because and this is true for any business, it's actually being really focused on what specific area are you an expert in? And if I look back in terms of my own career, when I started off, yes, I would say I was generically a coach, and probably, didn't kind of focus in on specific areas. But I mean, if I look at it now, I very much operate in that, optimizing leader potential and optimizing the potential of the leader's team. And that's a very specific area that I go into. And as you say, I think that there's more specialization coming into it. And I think the need for that is because, if you look at the great internet and the great web, it's a wonderful tool. But if you're not really specific about who you're targeting and what you're actually going to help that target market do, then you're just going to get lost in that sea of it. So I think it is about being really clear about the sweet spot for you and where you can make the biggest contribution to your clients. So I think that is true. I think that specialization has become more and more so. And I think it's for everybody's benefit. It just makes sense for everybody to be that way.
Yeah, I agree with you on that one. Now, you talk about the changing landscape of leadership and that there's so much more. There's changes happening. I picked up a copy of your book, and in the intro, you talk about, forests and forests of trees have been cut down in order to write leadership books. Why do we need another one? And so you go into some of these new things that are in the business world for leaders, and I want to dive into those. But before we do, let me ask you about some common mistakes that our leaders are making today.
Well, I think that the mistakes that new leaders make when they get appointed into it, I really am very, very passionate about this space, because I think that in many organizations, we either hire somebody in from the outside world or we promote somebody from one job to another. And, bar kind of some fairly minimal introduction to the rest of the organization, they're left to sink or swim. And now I don't think that's intentional on anybody's part, but I think that's just what happens. And really, when you look at it, those early time as a new leader that are so critical to the long-term success. And I think that there are a number of kind of things that really I work with clients to make sure that they really nail down. And I think the first one is being really clear about what are the expectations. What expectations do you have? What expectations do your boss have? What expectations do the other stakeholders have about what you are going to deliver in the first 3 months, 6 months, and 12 months. And I have seen that, with the best will in the world, people think that they make it clear, but then people go away and they have different interpretations of that. And that leads to, a lack of clarity. It leads to kind of a slight misunderstanding about what success looks like. It can lead to disappointment on one side or another in terms of what's actually happening. So I think that's, one is about the expectations that people really need to nail down when you get into that leadership role, when you come into the organization, or you get promoted to a role. And, don't forget, when you're promoted from one role into another, it's a different role. So it's not just another version of the role that you've just had. It's a fundamental. I mean, if you take it, when a salesman is promoted to sales manager, being a sales manager is a fundamentally different job to being a salesman. It's not just a kind of a bigger salesman's job with, a bigger salary and a bigger car. It's fundamentally a different job. So I think it is about that expectations. But I think the second thing is being really clear about the vision, strategy, and priorities for the business, that you're absolutely crystal clear about what they are, and not enough time is spent on that. The other one is around cultures and values. Do you really understand the culture of the organization and the values of the organization? And when I talk about that, I'm really talking about, how things are done around here, because every organization has their own kind of way of doing things. So do you understand it? Are you really clear about that? Do you have also a very, very, very crystal clear first 90-day plan that you have signed off on, your boss has signed off on, and everybody is clear? And I think the risk is that people coming in just get busy doing lots of stuff to make noise. And they don't, very often they make some wrong decisions because they feel under pressure, or, I've got to kind of justify my existence and being seen to do something. So I make some decisions. But if those decisions are the wrong things for the organization, they really damage their own brand and reputation in the organization. And that takes a long time to recover. And all of these things are avoidable. And the other thing is actually just investing time with their team to get to know the team, study their files, look at their personnel files, look at their track record, look at the stuff that came up, having discussions with them. And there are things that very often people just get busy doing lots of stuff and running around slightly scattered with no great focus and no great alignment to the other key stakeholders in the organization. And they're the things that I find typically that the biggest mistakes that people make.
This is a great list of different things, and I couldn't agree more with you. I mean, you have a tremendous background here in looking at organizations and seeing what's wrong. And I want to go back to one of the first ones that you mentioned, and that is that oftentimes we promote people from a position that they're very good at, that they're qualified at, like sales leader. And then we move them into a position of like management because we say, hey, you've done good. And I think there's some error happening on both the part of the employee and the employer. The employer is possibly moving our employees up too quickly before they're ready and not giving them the foundational training that they need to excel in their new job. In fact, I've often said that we promote to the highest level of incompetence where, they're great at one job and we keep promoting them up until we find a level where they're not doing a great job and then they get stuck there or they get fired from that position. But on the employee side, there's such this desire. We're in a gotta have it now, I want to be there yesterday type of atmosphere where our employees are requesting to be moved up before they're ready, before they've learned the traits necessary. And so we as leaders, how do we combat that? What's our step as leaders to make sure those below us aren't falling into this trap?
Well, I think there's a couple of things, and I think you've hit on a very valid point. I think that the first thing I'd say, Jake, is that when that organizations need to look at what are the career development opportunities for people, and that the only route to progress in the organization is not to actually become a manager of people, right? Because you very often, you mentioned salespeople, you see it also in highly technical roles, that people who are technically brilliant at a particular subject matter, but for their career to progress, they've got to become a manager. And it doesn't necessarily follow just because you're a good technician, you're going to become a very good manager of technicians. The two don't follow at all. So there's got to be a clear career path for the people to actually stay as that kind of individual contributor, that the only route to progress is not just in the management role. I think the second part to it is really through the kind of the personal development plan, so that you're looking at and you're exposing people to different opportunities to taste different elements of the role. Because I've seen it numerous times where people have actually, they've wanted a management role, they've gone into a management role, and then they actually discover two things. A, they don't like it, and B, they're not very good at it. And, so if they've had a taste of it, they might have recognized that in actual fact, it isn't the route they take. But you've got to have this whole thing about career progression, that you are succession training and succession developing the whole time, so that you actually are creating this kind of cadre and group of people who can step into roles as they become available, rather than just reacting when you've got a gap and saying, oh God, we now have a gap of management. Oh, Mary's really good and really bright and really talented. We'll put her in that role. And she's had no development, exposure to management, if that's the role it is. But I think also organizations need to look at how they are opening career progress to people, and that there is more than just getting in through a management route. And there are organizations doing that, and the organizations that are doing that, are really finding that they're getting the right people in the right jobs, doing the right work.
And I think this goes both ways as well. So you talk about management or leadership within a company needing to have kind of a thought out process and progress for their employees, but also the employees need to introspectively consider what's important in their lives and the direction that they're going. And, historically, we defined career progression as either a higher title or more pay. But nowadays, people are looking for other ways to be compensated, to be considered progressing within their career, whether it be continued training, whether it being, continuing education, continuing opportunities, whether it's flex time or opportunity to work away from the office. These kind of things are ways that we can create incentives within our office so that people feel like they're progressing without needing to change out of a role that they're doing very well. Because I think the worst thing for our companies is when we have employees that are being underutilized, or because we promoted them, their highest and best skill, the talent that they brought to the company that we hired them for, is no longer being used. It's easy for you and I, John, to talk about salesmen here because it's all of our listeners can identify. You talk about the difference between being able to go out and sell a product versus the ability to manage a team of salespeople requiring different skills. And so we need to look at ways that those salespeople that are great at what they do can feel fulfilled and progressing within their career without being forced into a management position that they may not want and may not be qualified for.
Absolutely. And I think going back to the point you started with is that there's also the responsibility on the employee side. And very often when I'm coaching senior executives, I'd always say to them that, you've got to proactively manage your career. Because to be fair to the organization, and I've been on the other side of it, right? I've been as a senior manager and CEO of a company where, in the absence of you telling me where you want to go, I'm going to put you in a role that I think is best suited for the organization. So there's a responsibility on the individual, the individual employee, to really reflect and see what direction do I want my career to go in. Because we've all seen people who have actually ended up in roles, and a year or two down the road thinking, how in God's name did I end up here? I certainly didn't want to get here. But they were not actually proactively managing the role and flagging to their senior managers the direction they want to take their career in. So I think you do have to do a bit of work as an individual to determine the direction of your own career. And I see that as a very important part of coaching that I do with executives.
Well, and I think this is a great way to transition now into your book. So your book, 10 Key Traits of Top Business Leaders, really focuses on how we as individual leaders can really identify the talents and strengths within ourselves and within our teams and really rise to the next level. And so there's 10 traits. Obviously, we won't have time to talk about all of them. You started to mention a little bit earlier this idea of culture. And I want to go back into that because I find culture as being a very transitional point in a business. And I mentioned before, John, I do a lot of work with small law firms. And as these law firms grow from 1 to 3 employees, where they can create this culture where everybody knows what everybody's doing and the company is the water cooler, to when they start to transition, I call it the tipping point around 6, 7, or 8 employees, when the culture starts to take on a life of its own. I've been very interested in diving more into this topic. So can you tell us about the cultural aspect of a leadership talent?
Well, I think it's a massively important one. And, you touched on the proverbial water cooler. And sometimes people kind of think about culture. I always feel, as a consultant, I always feel slightly uncomfortable sometimes when I talk about, vision and culture, because people go, oh, God, here's another consultant talking about vision and culture, as if it's something kind of vague and intellectual and nebulous, and when it's not at all. Because to me, fundamentally, as you mentioned it, if you want to understand what the culture of an organization is, listen to the conversation at the water cooler, because whether you like it or not, that's the culture. If you want to listen to the conversation, that will tell you what the culture of the organization is all about. And as a leader of the organization, and as in the organization, you have got to be the living embodiment of what that culture is. So you've got to spend time to actually understand exactly what sort of culture that you want in the organization. And then you've actually got to make sure that you're the living embodiment of that, because if you're not, people will see that instantly. If you're talking about what your culture and your values and what it stands for, then, and then your behavior is in conflict with that, then people are just going to dismiss you as a leader. So it really is important that when you're talking about culture, you're talking about vision, that as the leader, you've got to make sure that that's what you're talking about. That's what you're talking about time and time again. Vision and culture work is not just, we run one session or we run 2 sessions and that's it.
Or hang a poster on the wall.
Or hang up. Well, yeah, that's my pet hate. And when I go into organizations and I see the vision written in reception, I always have a slight, yeah, okay. And then you say to somebody, by the way, what's the vision of the organization? I don't know. As I was written in reception. Oh, that. So, and you've got to be able to connect the vision and the culture to what you're doing on a day-to-day basis, because your vision and your culture are the context for your vision. The vision, culture, and values are the context for everything that you're doing, and you got to make sure that how you're behaving is that living embodiment of that, because we know from research that has been done, independently of me and my organization. But actually, the number one reason that people leave organizations is because of the behavior of top management, right? That's the number one reason they leave. And a lot of that is because there is a conflict between what people say that the organization stands for and what they actually do. And if you want to, disenfranchise any of your people, is actually to do just that. So, the whole piece about culture and vision and values, that's got to be wrapped up and be a really important part of the job that you're doing as the leader, and that you are continuously bringing it forward in every, in conversations, in meetings, that you're really the flag bearer for that. Because, people say, oh, I don't like the culture that's done in our network or our sub offices or whatever. And I will say, well, hang on a second. If you don't like the culture down there, look in the mirror, because, the chances are that's where it's coming from, because the culture does get cascaded down from the top. So if you don't like it at the the grassroots of your organization, you really got to look in the mirror and start with yourself. So, and there's no point in starting to change it down at the grassroots. You got to change it at the top. So that's where the leaders have got to make sure that they are walking the talk in regard to that.
And the word that you used was intentional. You have to be intentional about your culture within your company. And one of the things, I'm a big believer, culture exists whether you like it or not. Now, you have the opportunity to intentionally or proactively create the culture that you want within your company, or it's going to be created for you. It's going to happen organically without your input. And at that point, it starts to get out of control, and you have to look at it and say, from the top down, what changes need to be made. So I love this conversation of culture. I want to ask you about implementation. And one of the things that you teach is great leaders focus on speedy execution. So talk to us a little bit about implementation.
Yeah, because I think that, at the end of the day, you've got your vision, you've got your strategy, you've got your values, you've got your culture, but then you actually have to go and do something in the field of play. And I think that when you look at that, the organizations that are good at implementation and delivery, now it doesn't mean that it's all perfect, right? Because very often I'm a great believer in imperfect action, because it's better than no action. If we wait for everything to be perfect, we will not do anything. But the people who are following you as a leader, and don't forget, you don't get the title of a leader. You're only a leader if people are following you. So, it's actually other people decide whether you're a leader or not you. And people will follow you if they see that you're really good about implementation. Are you really good about taking the idea, the concept, and you're getting it out into the marketplace, or you're getting it out through the organization so that people can see implementation at pace, so that there is, good execution, solid execution. You go into organizations and very often you kind of, we were late with that and we were late with that, and it's because of this and it's because of that, it's because of the other. And that's just becomes a culture of how you do things. And you've got to have a culture of kind of deadlines and accountability, and that goes both ways, so that the manager and the leader is held accountable for that. But I think that one of the things that organizations, and I've got, when I share a resource with you, I've got a short little video that people can look at, which I think is a really good little model, which I call about the 4 A's to bridge the gap. And it's about when you're actually looking at, setting out on the road for whether it's a project, initiative, whatever it might be, you've got to assess your data. So understand exactly, make sure that the data we have, we're focusing on the right, and then we align on that data. Then these are the actions we're going to get to. Then we get into action and the implementation. So that's the 3rd A. And the 4th A is to analyze, so that you come back and you analyze and say, well, how well did we do at each and every stage of that? So we actually take that back into the learning. So there's the organizations that are really good at that, of kind of having the review, that once we actually get through a particular project initiative, we then spend some time reviewing that or how we did. So we take the learning into the next one. And that means that our implementation gets better the next time around. The mistake I see made is that, very often we'll finish a project and we'll just jump into the next project without doing any review about how it is done and what we've learned. And then what happens is that we just make the same mistake again. But you've got to have clarity about that, and clarity is very key to really, really good implementation. And you've got to have, be really good at delegating. And there's as we all know, a big difference in delegating and dumping. But having that process of the 4 A's, where you assess, align, act, analyze, and go back and keep on going in that loop, is really effective way of getting good at implementation. And you've got to be able to demonstrate to the people who are following you and reporting to you that you are really a high performer when it comes into the field of play, and you don't just talk a good game. Because people who just talk a good game but don't actually perform in the field of play are seen through very quickly.
And I'm a big believer that businesses grow at the speed of decisions as decisions are being made. And one of the things that holds us back is when we have top leadership that doesn't know the direction that they want to go. Maybe they don't understand the vision of what they're trying to create. And so they hem and haw about the decision-making process. And what happens is it creates a roadblock. It creates a blockage that no one can move forward. Nobody's working, and everything grinds to a halt.
Yeah, and also everybody then reflects the same lack of decision making, because that poor decision making also cascades down through the organization, because it demonstrates that that's kind of how the top management do things around here. So that's how the rest of us will do it.
And John, this book that we're talking about, these 10 key traits of top business leaders, is got so much more that we just don't have time to talk about. But at the end of this podcast, we're going to have an opportunity for them to pick up a copy and really dive into it. But at this point, John, I'd love to switch gears and talk about a section I call Learning from Leaders. Get a little personal to go along with this business conversation we've had. Sound like a plan with you?
Great. Go for it.
All right, perfectly. So the first question is, the book currently on your Kindle or bedside table, what are you reading?
The one that I'm reading at the moment, and it's a fascinating book. Now, I'd have to say it's not a pick up and a little light read, right? It's a book called Sapiens. It's a brief history of humankind. And it's quite, I can't remember the name of the author because it's an unusual name, but it's a fantastic book. It is the history of humankind. And really, I find it just an extraordinary exploration of the evolution of man and how we have ended up in many ways and how kind of, the world has evolved for us. So if anybody really wants to have, I said, it's not a light read, it's not a quick read, and it's one that, I find that I've got to give time to. But at the moment, that's what I'm working through. And it is just brilliant.
And it's interesting. This is the second time in as many weeks that this book has come up. The author is Yuval Noah Harari.
It's correct. I couldn't remember it. Yeah.
Yeah. And this is a book that President Barack Obama, Bill Gates, Mark Zuckerberg have all raved about. Even Bill Gates, right on the cover of the book, is recommending this. So this is interesting. Twice in a row, I better pick a copy of this book up.
Yeah, I mean, it's not one that you pick up just before you go to sleep, right? It says you devote a little bit of time to it, but I tell you, it is really, really well worth it. And actually, I was just going through an airport yesterday, and I saw he's got another book actually out subsequent to that, but let me finish this one first. Highly recommend it.
Absolutely awesome. Okay, second question. What is your leadership superpower?
I think I found that a tough question to answer, to be perfectly honest with you. And I had to kind of reflect on that. I think that, I think I'm good at getting things done. As I said, I am a great believer in the principle of imperfect action, because I've learned the hard way not to wait until I've every I dotted and every T crossed. I will get out into the field of play, get things done, and then as I need to change them, improve them, better them, edit them, recreate them, whatever it might be, I will do it on the go. But once I get it out there, then it is it's actually something really important to actually have a principle of getting things done. I remember reading something by Seth Godin a number of years ago, somebody that I really enjoy reading, and his principle was just publish it. Just publish it. Don't analyze, have I got every word right? Did I get every sentence right? Just publish it. And I kind of go along with that principle of getting things done.
And it's such a great superpower. It goes back to what I just mentioned, and that is businesses grow at the speed of decisions. Make a decision and go. I think a lot of times business leaders get caught in this ready, aim scenario. And what we really need to do, and I'm not suggesting we don't aim, but we need to fire a little bit. And if it needs to be analyzed and readjusted, do that. But we need to be firing, taking action. So what a wonderful superpower. Next one then is a leadership mantra, quote, or philosophy, something that you live by.
Well, there's two that I have. I'm going to give you two. Sorry, I know this has been a bit greedy, but there's two that I have, and I have it beside my desk as I'm sitting here. And there are two that I really, really, really try to live by. One is from Jim Rohn, the great Jim Rohn, who said, "It's how you respond to what happens to you that determines the outcomes of your life." And I think that is really, really powerful. I love that. And the other one is from Viktor Frankl, and which is another one that I try and live by, was that everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way. And when you read his book, you understand what that means. And I just think that's a great philosophy to try and live by.
Yeah, just it's an incredible quote from when you understand the circumstance that Viktor Frankl was in, and to have him say that, I mean, it adds so much credibility and power to it. So both wonderful philosophies, and we love getting as many as we can get. So we'll take your greedy too, no problem. Our final question then is the book that you most often gift to friends, family, or colleagues.
Well, actually, interesting. The Viktor Frankl's book would be one of them. And A Man's Search for Meaning, that would be one of them, because I just think, I probably go back and read that roughly about every year to 18 months. And I'd have to, and as you know, it's not a long book, but every time I go back and I read it, I just get something else from it. I just think it is a phenomenal book. The other book that I would have, which would be more recent, that I'm a big fan of, is a book called Drive by Angela Duckworth. And I think that's just Grit. Sorry, Grit. I beg your pardon.
Yeah,
Grit.
Drive, Daniel Pink, but Grit, Angela Duckworth.
Sorry, Grit. Yeah, Angela Duckworth. The Grit is just, I think it's just a fantastic book. I love that book. I've given that to many people, and so many people that I've given it to have come back and said that really has changed the way I think. And I think she is remarkable. She's got some great TED Talks if you go and look for her there on YouTube. But I think Grit is just a great book.
And that is the book that I most often gift to friends, family, or colleagues. So I love that recommendation. John, it's been so good to have this chat with you. I know there's so much more we could talk about, but before we let you go, how can we find out more? How can we get a copy of this book and move from here?
Absolutely. Well, I mean, as I said, I wanted to make sure that everybody had the opportunity to get hold of the book. So I'm giving away the book. I'm also giving away that short video, which is about the 4 A's to bridge the gap, and also a link that if anybody wants to reach out and connect with me, they can do that. I'm delighted to have a chat with any members of your audience. And if they want to find that, they can go to my website, www.johnmurphyinternational.com. And then /ML for modern leadership. So it's ML. And there it will be a page dedicated to this podcast, to this interview, and they can get all the goodies there.
All right. I love it. I'm going to link all of this up on the show notes so that it'll be easy for them to go and get the quote, the book recommendations, and of course, that generous offer of getting a copy of your book and really diving into these 10 traits of business leaders that are so fundamental and so foundational in growth. John, you're a great speaker. You're a great podcast guest. You're a great podcast host. It's so wonderful to spend this time with you. Thank you for being here today.
Well, Jake, it's been a real pleasure, and thank you. I really appreciate it. I'm honored to be on your show.
All right, my friends, what a great interview, right? I mean, John is just a great guest. He brought so much value to the show. I love diving into his book a little bit. I wish we would have had a little bit more time to go into more of the traits of leaders, but we talked about culture and how we need to be intentional about creating the culture in our offices. And also we talked about implementation or making decisions, really acting and not just talking about it, and how that inaction, starting from the top, creates inaction at the bottom. So much great stuff there. Of course, everything that we talked about can be found on the show notes for this episode, which is jakeacarlson.com/ML95, episode 95, and everything will be there, including how to connect with John and get a copy of his book, this book, including how to get a copy of his book for free. So head on over to that website. You can find it on jakeacarlson.com/ML95. And until next week, I want to wish you the very best of days, a terrific Thanksgiving. I hope that you're celebrating and just enjoying and really thinking about those who mean so much to you in your life. And of course, stay awesome. Thanks for listening to the Modern Leadership Podcast. You can find me on Facebook at Speaker Jake, on Twitter at Jake A. Carlson, and of course the website, jakeacarlson.com. See you there.